All right, welcome, seasoned auditors. We're about to do a deep dive into what I think is the most critical phase of sustainability assurance under the new ISS 5000 standard. We're going to break down exactly what you need to do to get from all that evidence you've gathered to the final signed report. So imagine this. All your fieldwork is done. You've been through the ringer, but now the real work begins, right? This is where you have to synthesize everything into a conclusion and a formal report. And let me tell you, this is way more than just a box-ticking exercise. This is where your professional judgment truly gets put to the test. So here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to follow a really practical workflow. We'll start with evaluating your evidence, move on to forming that all-important conclusion, then we'll actually build the report. And finally, we'll get into those tricky situations, the ones that require some kind of modification. Okay, so the final phase. This is where it all comes together. And it's so important to remember that this new standard, which kicks in for periods starting on or after December 15, 2026, is really designed to set a much, much higher bar for all of us. The whole point is to get a consistent, global baseline that enhances credibility and trust in sustainability reporting everywhere. Okay, let's get right into it. The first critical judgment call you have to make is this. Have you actually obtained sufficient and appropriate evidence to back up your conclusion? This question right here is the absolute bedrock of your entire assurance report. Now, here's a really key distinction in sustainability assurance that you need to wrap your head around. Your evidence needs to be persuasive, not necessarily conclusive. ISA 5000 gets that we deal with a lot of inherent uncertainties. It's not like a financial audit where you've got a definitive bank statement. When you're looking at something like Scope 3 emissions or biodiversity impact, well, your goal is to build a compelling case with a body of evidence that, when you look at it all together, persuasively supports your conclusion. And this is where your professional judgment really, really comes into play. You're going to face some pretty unique challenges. Trying to assure a forward-looking statement, like a net zero target, is a totally different ballgame from verifying historical energy data. Or what about getting reliable information from a supplier buried deep in a complex value chain? The standard knows these complexities exist, and you have to weigh all these factors when you decide if your evidence has the quality and the quantity to cut it. This brings us to the very core of your role, doesn't it? Taking all that evidence and synthesizing it into a formal, defensible conclusion. It's not a simple calculation. It's a professional determination that you make based on the entire engagement and your expert evaluation of all the risks and findings. Before you even think about drafting that conclusion, you have to step back and assess the overall fairness of the presentation. This quote from the standard is so important because it's about more than just the numbers adding up. You have to ask, does this report tell the whole story? Is it transparent, or is it hiding something? Maybe highlighting a tiny recycling program while completely downplaying a major pollution incident. You're judging whether the report as a whole gives a balanced and fair picture of what's really going on. Now let's talk about how this all translates into the final wording, because it matters a lot. The difference between reasonable and limited assurance is critical, and ISA 5000 is super precise about it. A reasonable assurance opinion is positive. You say, in our opinion, the information is fairly presented. But a limited assurance conclusion, that's stated negatively. Nothing has come to our attention that causes us to believe the information is not fairly presented. It might seem like a small difference in words, but it signals a massive difference in the level of assurance you're providing. Okay, so let's move on to the report itself, the actual final product. ISSA 5000 does not leave this up to chance. It gives us a very specific blueprint with required elements to make sure everything is consistent and crystal clear for anyone reading it. Just think of this as your non-negotiable checklist. Every single report has to include these core elements, from a clear title that states the assurance level all the way to a detailed breakdown of responsibilities for both management and for you. This rigid structure is there for a reason. It's designed to eliminate any confusion and make sure that a user can pick up any ISSA 5000 report from anywhere in the world and know exactly where to find the key information they need. And within that structure, the conclusion paragraph itself has to be absolutely laser-focused. There can be zero ambiguity. Who was assured? What specific information are we talking about? For what time period? And, maybe most importantly, was it a limited or reasonable assurance engagement? This precision is everything. It makes sure the user knows the exact scope and the limits of your work. But of course, we all know that engagements are rarely perfect, right? So what happens when you find a material misstatement, or you just can't get the evidence you need? Well, ISA 5000 gives us a really clear decision tree for how to modify your conclusion. This table basically gives you the roadmap. The type of modification you're going to issue really hinges on two things. First, the nature of the issue. Is it a misstatement or a scope limitation? And second, its pervasiveness. Is the problem isolated or does it fundamentally torpedo the entire report? For example, a misstatement that's material but only affects one specific disclosure might just lead to a qualified except for conclusion. But if that misstatement is so huge it distorts the entire picture, that's pervasive, and you've got to issue an adverse conclusion. Now, it's really important to get this straight. An emphasis of matter paragraph is not a modification. Your conclusion is still clean. You use this tool to shine a big spotlight on something significant that management has already disclosed, but you think is so fundamental that users absolutely need to pay attention to it. For instance, a company might correctly disclose it's facing a massive lawsuit over an environmental spill. You could use an emphasis of matter paragraph just to make sure investors don't miss that critical piece of context. An other matter paragraph, on the other hand, handles the opposite situation. This is your way of telling the user something important that they won't find anywhere in the company's report. It's relevant to understanding the engagement itself or your report, and again, it does not modify the conclusion. A classic example is if the prior year's report was assured by a different firm and you want to make that clear. It's a powerful way to provide necessary context. So, there you have it. That's our look at forming the conclusion and reporting under ISA 5000. As you can see, the standard gives us a really robust framework, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to your professional expertise. And that leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question, doesn't it? In this new world of complex, forward-looking, and often qualitative information, is the skilled application of professional judgment about to become the single most defining skill for any of us in sustainability assurance?